The other day I woke up to an email from Spanish Social Security. The email was meant to notify me about a further notification which I could download on the back of some government website. In my tax inspection article, I described the unique mix of emotions one feels while waiting for the mail carrier to come up the stairs with a certified letter. Today I can confirm that the mix of emotions is similar for an online notification, but lasts longer. It takes around 7 minutes to log into any Spanish government website, giving a lowly taxpayer like myself plenty of time to think about what bad news might be waiting on the other side. Several pages of Spanish legalese later, I've understood that I owe the government another 4 figures in Social Security payments for the year 2023. Of course, I'm a freelancer. I pay through the nose already. So I made abundant contributions to Social Security during 2023 already. But it now turns out that those were just provisional, and that the government has reserved the right to adjust what I owe after the fact. Thus, a large new tax bill. Hooray! Hey everybody, it's Daniel. Welcome back to Spain to Go, the best podcast in the entire multiverse for all things Spain. This is episode 106, 106. I hope you're having a great day wherever you are. First, Paulo is our most recent donor over here. Paulo wrote to me in Spanish, but I'll briefly translate what he said into English. He says, I'm a loyal follower of your podcast. I would like for you to send a shout out in your Spain to Go podcast to Dr. Jose Mentecho and Rosa Melcacho Prieto. So thank you very much, Paulo, and of course a shout out to Dr. Jose Mentecho and Rosa Melcacho Prieto. I don't know where Paulo is writing from, but apparently Paulo speaks enough English or understands enough English to follow along here. Hopefully his friends do too. So thank you very much, Paulo. If you would like to be a donor and receive a prestigious shout out at the beginning of my next episode, you can donate at expatmadrid.com/donate. expatmadrid.com/donate. You can donate anything from €3 up to however much you want. I appreciate it. I do this podcast for free, but I enjoy talking about Spain. It would help me, of course, to spend more time on this rather than some other project that, I have a dozen other things I work on. So expatmadrid.com/donate. Thank you, Paulo, and let's get on with the show. Today we're talking about the topic, is Spain overrated? Because it's come to my attention that living abroad, living in Spain has been oversold recently among the younger crowd, possibly among the older crowd as well, and I would like to set the record straight about some aspects of expat life that you may not have considered. But first, back to my new tax bill, because sangria is a beverage that is popular among tourists in Spain, but the actual meaning of sangria is bloodletting. I would say that sangria could be also used to describe the sound of Spanish tax authorities bleeding small businesses dry. But the legal basis for this new tax bill I received is that the government a few years ago decided to redo the system of Social Security payments for freelancers in Spain. The autónomos who earn less money will only be paying 200 or so euros a month, meaning they're still probably losing money every month they work, but that's a different topic. The rest of us will be paying much more. And apparently that much more also includes retroactive demands for past year's payment. I should eventually get a pension payment out of this, and the tax bill this time isn't going to kill me. It's just unexpected and annoying. Doing some reading, I find that the adjustment I received the other day is due to the fact that the big boys in the government wanted to charge all of us freelancers more for the time that they spent finalizing the law. But they couldn't get the law done in time, so they just made it retroactive. Now, having done the math, they're sending us a bill for back taxes. As I said a moment ago, hooray. So, is living in Spain overrated? Well, last week I met up with Lydia from the Got a Case of Wanderlust blog and podcast. Got a Case of Wanderlust on Spotify and elsewhere. Lydia is much younger than I am, approximately half my age, if you must know. And we talked about whether Spain lived up to its hype or whether life in Spain is sort of overrated. She said that she was not finding it to be quite what she expected. I guess it's not clear if that's because of something about Spain, or if perhaps moving abroad is just an overhyped option in general. One that in reality is sometimes more difficult and depressing than it is portrayed. In an episode of Lydia's podcast that I listened to, she talks with another girl about how Instagram sparked their desire to get out there and see the world. And I can see why the reality of expat life might not live up to the high expectations created by a 30-second video from an online influencer. I used to follow some girls who made those sorts of videos, and they usually went like this. Here's a typical day in my life living abroad in Spain. Morning yoga in front of a sunny window, running on the beach in a bikini, tapas and jamon for lunch, afternoon snorkeling, a brief and fun Spanish lesson, and finally, cocktails at a glamorous rooftop bar to end the evening. In this Instagram version of life abroad, nobody pays bills, and people apparently spend most of the day jumping up and down and laughing hilariously over mundane events. Watching that sort of thing, I can't help but feel bad about my own daily grind. Why am I worrying about being a useful member of society, working, paying taxes, etc., when there's so much fun to be had? Of course, it's impossible for real life to maintain the level of excitement shown in someone's brief highlight reel, because real life, like it or not, contains a certain amount of drudgery. You've got to find a place to live, earn some money, pay taxes, feed yourself, and spend time in transport from one thing to the next. If you're lucky, you might have friends, family, or a supportive partner to make all this a bit more manageable, and to get a feeling of camaraderie instead of facing the insults and indignities of modern life alone. But if you're an expat living in someone else's country, guess what? You may also have no one at your side when things get rough. All this to say, living in Spain is sometimes less fun than portrayed on Instagram. A few days after my conversation with Lydia, I spoke to Natasha Kennedy for the previous episode of this podcast, that is episode 105. Natasha came to Spain in 2001, just a few years before I did. In the time since, she's founded TT Madrid, a training program for English teachers, and the BLC Group, a satellite university that teaches business skills and Spanish to a young crowd of international people hoping to integrate in Spain and get an accredited university degree in the process. You can check that out. Like I said, it's episode 105. The important thing here is that on that episode of the podcast, we talked about how coming to Spain 20 plus years ago was quite a bit different than it is now. Natasha is British, and I think the British have more of an idea of what happens in Spain than Americans tend to, but I, for one, made it to Spain with very little information whatsoever about what I was getting into. We didn't have social media to give everything that glam gloss it has now. We didn't have streaming shows like Emily in Paris. All I had, in fact, were some stereotypes about Europe. Old buildings, better cheese, and open-minded women describes most of what I thought I would be finding once I started my life abroad. And in hindsight, I wasn't wrong. I found all those things. But it helps not having overly high expectations when you go into an overseas move like this. And it's probably simpler if you've already accepted that your life will contain a fair amount of struggle. I had, for one reason or another, figured out that life is struggle pretty early on, and I wasn't expecting my life to get easier when I moved to Spain. So the reality of expat life wasn't a huge existential shock. It even seemed like an improvement. But your mileage may vary. Okay, going off the text here for a moment, it was a huge existential shock. I'm exaggerating a bit, but it was still an improvement. Living abroad does a lot of things to your personality, especially if you move abroad when you're very young, like I was. I came here at age 21. My brain had not yet fully formed. I did not know this at the time, but a person's brain, I believe the male brain specifically, tends to solidify its synaptic connections around age 25. So I had 4 years of, extreme youth and neuroplasticity here in Spain, and it was quite an experience. So yes, existential shock, but also an improvement. Returning to the text, maybe living abroad is what's overrated. Because back to the main question here today, is Spain overrated? Maybe, but I don't think so. It depends on your personal preferences and who's rating it to begin with. However, is expat life in general overhyped? For a lot of people, I think it probably is. You may have the idea you're going to move abroad, leave your woes behind, and spend your days at the beach, eating paella, drinking sangria, and enjoying life as only Europeans can do. But the struggle, as they say, is real. Language barriers don't go away with a few weeks on Duolingo. The culture will have things that take some getting used to. And hey, have I ever mentioned the constant bureaucracy? I have, actually. Check out episode 100 on my Spanish nationality crisis for more about that. Episode 100. In any case, the language barrier, the bureaucracy, and the cultural difficulties you might have are going to be permanent fixtures of your new life in Spain or some other country. So you'd better get used to them. My advice is to learn as much of the language as you can. It'll help a lot in everything else you want to do. And of course, I'm writing about Spain here, but I have people reading my blog and commenting from Germany or Italy or wherever. They also have similar issues. Learn the language, deal with the bureaucracy, try to understand the culture, etc. It's not just Spain. In any case, it seems like Spain these days is becoming sort of an expat playground. A lot of wealthy Americans are now dreaming of moving abroad. They apparently think they'll arrive in Spain, rent some fancy flat for 4,000 euros a month, have a siesta their first afternoon here, and their whole lives will change. And maybe if you've got that much money, life in Spain is pretty relaxing, and that plan is totally practical. The amount of money it takes for someone to be wealthy over here is a lot less than what you might expect. And relatedly, the sort of relaxed Spanish lifestyle I'm describing here isn't something everyone is able to do. But it may work for you, and more power to you. The golden visa recently ended, but the non-lucrative visa awaits. Don't listen to the anti-tourism protesters. 99.8% of Spaniards are just fine with you being here. Let's talk about one of those cliches I've gotten quite tired of by this point. I see this one on the Facebook groups quite a lot. I can imagine people coming from the US and then getting on a Zoom call back to their friends and family and saying something along the lines of, "Oh, it's just marvelous. Back in the US, we live to work, but here in Spain, people work to live." Well, yeah, they do. Like a lot of cliches, it's not that this one is wrong, it's just that it's annoying. Working to live is just what you do if your economy doesn't provide a lot of opportunities for getting ahead. You work, you live, and you pay taxes. And you hope to be able to continue doing so for some indefinite period of time into the future. Many Americans have decided this is some sort of enlightened life philosophy, but I think it's just the reality of most people on this planet. They struggle not to get ahead, but to get by. The U.S. economy is quite special in that it gives people a lot of opportunities for getting ahead, if that's your thing. That's why people from every other country in the world are lining up at U.S. embassies to get a green card. So this is your gentle reminder, O future expat, to mind the reality gap. I'm sure the gap between expectation and reality isn't new, and it isn't only a problem for people moving to Spain either. It happens in other parts of life all the time. And social media, of course, makes it worse. For example, people have been getting their ideas about relationships from Disney movies and romantic comedies for the last several decades. The basic premise of most of these is that getting together is some long, difficult process, but once you are together, it's happily ever after. Real adults know that's not true, although the number of real adults in our current cultural moment is small. Anyway, moving to a new country is something like that. It's portrayed as another happily ever after. But in reality, it's easy enough to buy a ticket somewhere, fall in love with a new city, and think things are going great for a few months. Building a real life afterwards is much more difficult. And if your favorite expat influencer chronicled a day spent standing in line at the police station, renewing an ID card, you would probably skip ahead to someone more interesting. Someone, for example, who looked good running on a beach in a bikini. That's about all I've got for today. I hope you are having a great day wherever you are. Shout out once again to Paulo, as well as, Dr. Jose Mentecho and Rosa Melcacho Prieto. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much for donating. You can also be featured on a future episode if you go to expatmadrid.com/donate and send some money my way. expatmadrid.com/donate. Thank you very much. In other news, I have a YouTube channel. It's called Learn Spanish with Daniel. I have made several new videos for people trying to learn Spanish recently. I've got one about masculine and feminine, one about the verb poder. I go kind of into depth, so masculine and feminine, I talk about a lot of different things. All the, words that end in O that are masculine, all the words that end in A that are feminine, but also the exceptions, also the ways that people are expressing gender neutrality these days, in which gender is a rather more complex topic than it used to be, etc. So, deep dives into interesting topics in Spanish grammar and vocabulary over there. Learn Spanish with Daniel is the YouTube channel. Just put that into YouTube, you'll find me. expatmadrid.com is where I do most of my other Spain-related stuff. I've got something over there about my friends over at Continentalis. Continentalis.eu. If you go to continentalis.eu and you sign up for one of their services, they will, for example, help you out quite a bit if you're looking to get your Spanish nationality. They can do the FBI background check, the birth certificate. This is for Americans, of course. FBI background check, birth certificate issued by your state, apostille of The Hague, and sworn translations for both. They'll do this. It's pretty easy. It made my life a lot easier because I didn't have to harass my mom to go to the Arizona Secretary of State or something for all of this stuff. So on the blog, I have a new article about Continentalis and what they offer. They're making an offer now for the auxiliares de conversación. If they're trying to renew their visa, that's a thing that is probably not relevant to most of the people listening here, but they're a new company. I would like to help them out. If you go to continentalis.eu, let me try to spell continentalis really quick here. Okay, it's the word continent, and then there's ALIS on the end. Continentalis.eu. Go there. If you sign up for any of their stuff and you tell them Daniel sent you, or possibly use the promo code Daniel, that will help them out. They also might give me some sort of small commission off of this. If there is one thing that I have learned over the past 20 years of dealing with Spanish bureaucracy, it is that it is cheaper in the long run to just get good help with your bureaucratic stuff. You could probably do a lot of stuff without a lawyer, but it is a huge pain in the ass. So you don't need to. Get help, for example, from continentalis.eu, or ask Roberto over at Melcart Abogados to help you out. Melcart, MELCART. They do all kinds of legal stuff based in Madrid, but also around Spain if you need help with Spanish immigration and other. Melcart Abogados. Tell them also that Daniel sent you. You could go book a bike tour around some part of Spain with biketourinspain.com. I recently did a bike tour across Extremadura out in the west. I've got an episode of the podcast about that, which you can look around for. It was great. I highly recommend it. It was, in 20 years, one of the best Spain experiences that I have had. So, biketourinspain.com. Tell Raul at biketourinspain.com that Daniel sent you. He will appreciate it. We've got at least some people who have heard the podcast and then signed up for some bike tours over there. So I am very happy about that. It's a great experience, and Raul organizes these things very well and for prices that are quite reasonable for what you're getting. Other than that, you could follow me on Instagram, but as you can tell from the tone of this episode, I am not making glossy videos about how fun expat life is. I post some things from time to time, and it's an easy way to message me if you would like. I am not running on the beach in a bikini. I am not jumping up and down in front of Sagrada Familia. I swear to God, some of these people on Instagram, if you saw them doing this in real life, you would think they were complete nut jobs. But I guess we've gotten used to how people act on Instagram. So, I might have a number of reactions when standing in front of the Sagrada Familia Basilica here in Barcelona, nearing completion, by the way, Sagrada Familia. I might go over there, it's near my house. I might have a certain sort of subdued emotional response to seeing this great work of art. However, I would not jump up and down and start laughing maniacally like people apparently do on Instagram. Anyway, that's me. If you feel like going to Sagrada Familia, jumping up and down and laughing maniacally, it would probably help if you're an attractive woman in your early 20s, because this tends to look better in that sort of thing. But, you do you. If you're in my neighborhood, of course, let me know. And, you can find me on Instagram, write me a message, and I will come and have a couple of tapas with you. Alcohol-free beer and possible tapas is what I'm into these days. So, happy to meet fans of the podcast. If you have any friends who are learning English, perhaps you would like to recommend my books. If they are Spanish speakers who are learning English, perhaps you would like to recommend my books on Amazon. Just look for my name, Daniel Welsh, over there on Amazon. I've got 16, 17 different books that I've written for Spanish speakers to learn English. If you can listen to this in English, I can guarantee that you do not need to learn English from me, but I do thank you for listening in any case. Once again, from beautiful Barcelona, thank you for listening. I hope you're having a great day wherever you are, and hasta la próxima. Bye.